Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. For today, I want to go over a champion with a very interesting role, not one that we see too often given that there's only a handful of them in the game. And the funny thing is, I actually forgot he even existed when I made the AP Bruisers video, which is my bad. Anyways, let's go ahead and discuss what happened to Galio, the Colossus. Honestly, I was torn over whether or not I wanted to make a What Happened To episode on him or rework retrospective considering he's a prime candidate for either, but I figure I can release this one first and then touch on his VGU later. He's actually one of my favorites. But back on topic, in League, rarely do you ever find someone whose entire identity is based on dealing with a group or archetype of characters, certainly not in this day and age. Last year I made a video talking about anti-carries, which are a group of champions who carry games by essentially preventing the enemy carries from doing so, and Galio was on the cover of the thumbnail. But what separates him from others is that he was explicitly designed to be an anti-carry, whereas they are only anti-carry by coincidence. In his lore, he was originally created as a bulwark against enemy mages for Demacia, which for the uninitiated really dislikes the idea of magic. His entire body is made of petricite, a stone that absorbs magical power, and this would end up reflecting in his ability design as well, being one of the rare few who scale off of magic resist. If Malphite or Rammus is the tank dedicated towards countering physical damage and DPS, then Galio is the tank dedicated towards countering magic damage and burst. Of course, considering how burst-oriented the game has been over the past 5 or so years, it's no surprise that he was fielded relatively often ever since his rework in 2017. I mentioned earlier that he scales off of magic resist, so we'll start there. First with his passive. Colossal Smash imbues his next basic attack to do splash damage, kind of like Ravenous Hydra, that's modified to deal magic damage plus some extra in the form of base damage, 50% AP scaling, and 60% of his magic resist. That's pretty serious business, especially with a cooldown of only 5 seconds. The other element of his MR scaling is Shield of Durand. It is 3 metrics, but the one of import is the damage reduction part. At base, it's 40% magic damage reduction rank 5 plus 5% per 100 ability power and 8% per 100 bonus magic resist, and the numbers are halved towards physical damage. Not only does his damage increase with magic resist, but so does his endurance, both physical and magic damage reduction at that. If you think about it, Galio's ability to shut down magic damage may actually be more effective than Malphite's ability to shut down armor. Simply by pressing the W, like even during the channel, you essentially tag all champions with a scaling exhaust when attacking you, and it lasts for 2 seconds after as well. But ironically, most of the time you don't actually build MR on Galio, you go full AP, since Colossal Smash and Shield of Durand scale off of both. But ability power also causes Winds of War, Justice Punch, and Hero's Entrance to grow stronger as well. He has very good AP ratios across the board. Going back to the W for a moment, unlike Malphite whose defense comes in the form of a big stat line, Galio's defense is damage reduction, which if you don't know, is basically armor and magic resist that bypasses armor and magic penetration. At 4 items or so depending on if you buy Death Cap, Galio hangs around 600 ability power in the late game. That's an extra 60% bonus damage reduction added to the 40%. Yes, that means with sufficient enough AP and or MR, Galio can theoretically become immune to any and all magic damage while reducing physical damage by an equally substantial amount as well. He is the ultimate defense against burst champions, while dealing very high damage in return. It's not as much as a dedicated mage, mind you, but if you get slammed with Justice Punch, that all but guarantees he'll take the full damage from the rest of his attacks too. And on top of that, he has great counter engage ability in the form of Hero's Entrance, allowing him to defend his allies from burst damage to some extent. You would think that with the disruption-centric playstyle, his usage would be relatively consistent, right? We've seen this kind of volatile graph before where a champion would have wildly fluctuating pick rates from like 2% all the way to 20%, and Galio is one such example. Since 2021 though, he's been on a steady decline, but his win rate has been at a comfortable 50 to 55% for the past couple of years. A kit designed around countering burst damage sounds at the very least like a worthwhile pocket pick. So why isn't he? His low average popularity has nothing to do with his effectiveness. As we just went over, he's borderline overpowered if the enemy team is foolish enough to face him head on. If the enemy team is foolish enough. Being an anti-carry, Galio is inherently designated as your first line of defense, not your main line of attack. While he functionally can deal with heavy magic damage and burst comps consistently, the issue is that he himself is unable to use that disruption offensively, and in solo queue, top and mid-value champions who take matters into their own hands. Galio's problem really boils down to being too much of an anti-carry, that he forgot the carry part. In general, other anti-carries exert their pressure through forced errors, which means they can advance the game state like a regular carry and punish the enemy carries for responding. Let's look at Malzahar for a moment. Why is he so good at shutting down carries? It's because he forces the enemy team into a situation where if they don't take action, they'll slowly bleed out over the course of a game. But taking action is exactly what Malzahar wants, since he can then punish them for choosing the only option they have. The way he does that is by using his basic abilities to constantly push waves and chip away at the enemy team. The moment one of them runs out of patience and tries to counterattack, he presses ultimate. Checkmate. Shaco works the same way too. He runs around being a piece of baiting you into recklessly attacking him, only to run head first into a Jack in the Box, and then he splits into two and hacks away at you. In other words, they are you triggered my trap card champions. To do that though, you have to force your opponent into a situation where they have no choice but to trigger that trap card, either by pressuring them or baiting them, and Galio kinda sucks at doing either by himself. A psychological weapon used by anti-carries is the illusion of vulnerability. When you're an assassin or a diver and you look at someone like Shaco or Malzahar, yes, they're annoying, but they're also usually squishy, which means if you act fast or outplay them, you can shut them down quickly. The same can't really be said for the likes of Poppy or Galio, who require significantly more effort to take down. So there's less of a chance someone like Zed is gonna wanna all-in you when you can invalidate his entire combo at the press of a button. No sane person will engage on a Galio unless they know for sure he's isolated. Conversely, Galio is incapable of pressuring opponents enough to force them to attack you out of desperation. Winds of War has good damage and serviceable range, but it's slow and very position dependent. His neutral game just isn't very strong. In the past though, he used to be able to start fights really well. Prior to version 9.14, you could flash while charging your W, giving him a way to surprise people over walls and stuff, as Justice Punch is way too predictable of a gap closer and can't go through walls. But they took that out because they thought it was too broken. His lack of a reliable way to be proactive with his kit can be supplemented with Predator to some degree, but with it carries a lot of risk. If you want engage potential, you forfeit the much needed survivability of Aftershock, which synergizes perfectly with your W. Vice versa, if you want tankiness, you might need someone else to start fights like a Blitzcrank or Alistar. Let's say a fight breaks out though and you're in prime position to use the full force of your kit. Here's where the next hurdle comes into play. If positioned and timed correctly, Galio has enough area disruption to establish control of an entire battlefield, but in most cases he has only one shot at doing so. His cooldowns are ridiculously long, requiring him to choose carefully when and where to use each attack, and all of them have a chance to miss. The shining virtue of the Warden subclass is their deceptively good uptime in combat. The sister class, the Vanguards, bet a lot of their strength on their primary engage, but if you take a look at Wardens, all of them except for Galio have rather consistent damage output or disruption. Brom's passive means even one basic attack on someone can lead to a stun. Shen's Twilight Assault gives him good scrapping power. Poppy's Hammer Shock is only a 4-second cooldown at max rank. Tahm Kench is no shortage of damage with his passive, and Taric has Bravado with Starlight's Touch. Galio's Colossal Smash has a low cooldown, but none of his active abilities are spammable, meaning for a good 5 to 8 seconds at a time, he's nothing but a glorified meat shield with a small bit of damage. League's current environment does place a huge emphasis on burst damage, which he excels at shutting down, but it focuses equally on uptime as well. All of the game's most popular one-tricks are famously good at staying dangerous from the start of a fight to the end of it. Why this hurts Galio is that his all-in is really weak. He can only do short trades, not full-blown fights or a poke. Even if he nullifies an assassin or a mage's burst damage, unless he can one-shot them back, their burst rotation will likely refresh faster than his. Moreover, hypothetically, should he exhaust his resources to stop the mid laner, that's only one threat down. There's still the top, jungle, mid, and bot laner to contend with. They probably have more than enough damage to shred you to pieces once your Shield of Duran wears off. That's one other thing, since Galio tends to build ability power, he doesn't actually have real defense like armor and magic resist like your standard tank. He usually relies on Aftershock and his W for protection, but Shield of Durand only lasts for 2 seconds after the channel completes. Barring ability haste, for the remaining 14 seconds you're as squishy as a regular mage. Everything about his kit is in short bursts. His damage, his lockdown, even his durability. Now, by the time you see this video, patch 12.10, the durability update, will be well underway, and I'm not entirely sure how much it will shake up the meta, but prior to that, we've been in a damage-heavy meta for going on 4 years at this point. While it seems like you would thrive in that kind of environment, as I said before, there are just as many machine guns as there are tactical nukes, and Galio's kit is only able to handle the latter. Lastly, the very nature of his kit prevents him from having the best of both worlds, as that would be extremely unfair. Since he gains both damage and endurance from building either damage or endurance, he will naturally outpace a lot of mid laners come mid-game, and so Riot curtailed both aspects to keep him from cheesing anyone with burst or magic damage, which is like 70% of the roster. From 2017 to 2019, his presence would go from non-existent to pick ban OP overnight because Riot could not figure out for the life of them how to successfully balance a champion who's supposed to scale off of magic resist and ability power at the same time. During that time, I remember he was in more than half of all patch notes, 7.7, 7.13, 7.16, 7.21, By the way, that was the infamous patch where the balance team's dumbass gave his Q like 50% max health damage with one AP item. Those are good times. 7.22, 7.24, 8.5, 8.8, 8.9, 8.24, 9.1, 9.2, 9.11, 9.14. This man got like 3 mini reworks in the span of 2 years. I'll go into more detail on that when I make the rework retrospective, but the long and short of it is, they just couldn't find a healthy middle ground for him. Earlier I said that Galio suffers from being almost too situational, but when he was first relaunched, he wasn't just a magic damage counter, he was an everything counter. You essentially had a tank with the wave clear of a mage, the engage potential of a vanguard, the disruption of a warden, the endurance of a juggernaut, the burst damage of an assassin. While having a global ultimate, he covered way too many bases, and it's not hard to see why. If you build ability power on Galio, not only do you get to enjoy his really solid AP ratios on all of his abilities, which are all damaging abilities mind you, but you also get bonus damage reduction on your W and a lot of it at that. Remember, at 600 ability power, you basically gain complete immunity to magic damage and have all physical damage for up to 5 seconds. If you take magic resist on him, you get the benefit of having natural resilience against magic damage while still doing bonus damage with your passive. Obviously, ability power works better, but you get what I mean. Back then though, Hero's Entrance used to give his target ally damage reduction, 20 to 30% base plus 8% per 100 bonus MR. It was removed in patch 8.24, but considering a full MR build could get you almost 300, you essentially gave more than 50% damage reduction to one ally. That's why he was so good in pro play. Galio could make anyone on his team near indestructible. Fast forward to now, he's kind of in a limbo state where you don't deal as much burst damage as a mage, not consistently anyway, and you can't withstand the same kind of punishment as a tank either. Before we wrap it up though, one thing that I think is important to bring up that I didn't really give enough attention to in previous Why No One Plays is the way a champion starts out. The first year or two of a champion is crucial to establishing a loyal fan base. It's very rare for someone who's been out for a long time to suddenly accrue an influx of players who will proudly use them even when they get nerfed. The more stable their maiden voyage is, the more likely they are to get one-tricked, and one-tricks make up the bulk of a champion's popularity, especially when they're not meta. If you imagine someone like Lee Sin, everyone plays him because the only things Riot does to his kit are increase or decrease numbers and cooldowns. He's still able to do everything that he could do since day one, it's only a matter of efficiency. Galio went through so many changes that altered a lot of his fundamental attributes. Because of that, no one really held on to him since every 2 months or so, something would happen that forced them to rethink how he's supposed to be played. Is he a full tank? Is he a burst one-shot mage? Can he do this or that? Yada yada yada. Consequently, even though he's been stabilized for the past, year and a half or so, people only use him when he's relevant and ditch him when he's not because there are no Galio one-tricks to maintain his pick rate in the off-season. Being an ambiguous hybrid between a mage and a tank is not really helping his case either. Personally speaking, I love his design, but he needs to be either one or the other. Riot is trying too hard to market him as an anti-burst champion who has burst damage himself, and it's not really working out. Although that's going to be difficult to accomplish in light of pro players viciously spamming him the second he becomes even a little bit strong. So with that in mind, what do you think is the solution to Galio's fluctuating pick rate? Do you agree that he should either be a tank or a mage, or is there a bigger problem affecting his current state? Feel free to share in the comments down below. I will be revisiting this topic when I get to his rework retrospective, so if you're looking forward to that, it would be awesome if you could give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for when it comes out eventually. Also, consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Why No One Plays episodes after this one. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.